David Bowie publicly cried only once in his life, at Jim Henson's funeral in 1990. "I let him down," he whispered to a close friend. These words might sound like an exaggeration, but the truth was far more complex. Those chaotic shoots between 1985 and 1986 weren't just a film production, they were an ego clash between two artists, battles over creative vision, and ultimately a failure that neither could bear. While Bowie spent 6 hours in makeup every day on those sets, one thought consumed him: "I'm a rock star, what am I doing here?" Jim Henson, meanwhile, was trying to realize his dream fairy tale while slowly losing control, and 15-year-old Jennifer Connelly was caught between two giants. If this story moves you, please don't forget to subscribe and hit that like button. We'll continue sharing the darkest moments in music history. April 1985. Elstree Studios, the massive production complex north of London, was hosting one of cinema's most ambitious fantasy film projects. Jim Henson, the man who shaped millions of children's imaginations with The Muppet Show and Dark Crystal, had set out to create a new masterpiece, and this time he wanted rock and roll's most charismatic chameleon by his side, David Bowie. But on that first day, things didn't go as planned. When Bowie sat in the makeup chair at 6 in the morning, 6 hours of torture awaited him. The makeup for Jareth the Goblin King was one of the most complex prosthetic applications of its time. Dozens of pieces were glued to Bowie's face, each secured with special adhesives, then covered with layers of makeup. After the first 3 hours, Bowie began having trouble breathing. By the 5th hour, he told the makeup crew, "I can't do this." Brian Froud, the film's concept designer and one of Henson's closest collaborators, remembers that period. As the hours progressed, they could see panic in Bowie's eyes. Henson kept saying, "Art requires pain." When Bowie finally got to the set at 1 in the afternoon that day, he was already exhausted, and not a single scene had been shot yet. Jim Henson's vision was clear. Labyrinth would be bigger, more complex, and more impressive than Dark Crystal. Over 200 puppets, massive set designs, and practical effects on an unprecedented scale. But this vision came at a cost, and Bowie wasn't the only one paying it. Jennifer Connelly, the young actress selected during casting at age 14, had just turned 15 when filming began. During the first week of shooting, the makeup removal process was as painful as the application. Even with special solvents, Bowie's skin got irritated every day. By the 3rd week, marks began forming on Bowie's face, and the film doctor had to intervene. But Henson wasn't thinking about stopping. The first major conflict between Bowie and Henson happened over the music. Bowie wanted to use his own compositions entirely for Jareth's songs. After all, he was the creator of iconic songs like Space Oddity, Heroes, and Let's Dance. Nobody could tell him anything about music. But Henson thought differently. The film was his creative vision, and he wanted the music to fit his aesthetic. A serious argument took place in the recording studio in May. When Bowie played the first version he'd prepared for Magic Dance, Henson shook his head. "This is too Bowie. It needs to be more fantastical, more fairy tale-like." Bowie wasn't used to anyone interfering with his music like this throughout his career. "Jim, I've been doing this for 15 years. Music is my thing," he said. Henson didn't back down. "But this is my film, David, and you need to understand the language of the film." After that day, the atmosphere on set completely changed. Bowie and Henson only talked about work now. The production crew split into two camps, Henson supporters and Bowie supporters. And caught in the middle, Jennifer Connelly felt pressure from both sides. Terry Jones, Monty Python member and the film's screenwriter, closely observed the situation. When two big egos come together on the same project, you either create something magnificent or everything explodes. With Labyrinth, it was the latter. Henson wanted to keep all control. Bowie had never been accustomed to giving control to anyone. By June, shooting began experiencing serious delays. Henson kept making them repeat scenes because Bowie's performance didn't match the vision in his mind, and with each take, Bowie felt a little more diminished. July 1985. The most challenging part of filming had arrived, the Labyrinth scene with the Escher stairs. Inspired by M.C. Escher's famous relativity drawing, this set was one of the most complex physically constructed film sets ever built. Stairs going in every direction, gravity rules not working, and constantly changing camera angles. It was a dazzling visual achievement. But for Bowie, this was personal hell. Bowie's claustrophobia was a known condition throughout his career. Tight spaces, high ceilings, and restricted movement could trigger panic attacks. And the Escher set contained all of these. The set was built 12 meters high inside a closed studio. The walls were very close together, and with the makeup, Bowie's movement was already restricted. On the first day of shooting, after spending 3 hours inside the set, Bowie didn't feel well. The set doctor intervened. Bowie was advised to rest because the claustrophobic environment was harming him. But Henson didn't stop. Production had already exceeded the budget. $25 million had been spent, and the film wasn't even halfway done. The studio, TriStar Pictures, was applying pressure every day. Henson was backed into a corner. The film would either be the peak of his career or his tombstone. Bowie was in a different dilemma. He had a contract and couldn't disappear, but every day he went to the set, he felt like he was losing himself a little more. "I'm an artist, not a puppet," he complained to his manager. Jennifer Connelly was one of the few people who observed Bowie's state off set. Bowie was very quiet outside of filming. He sat in his trailer, not talking to anyone. One day she went up to him and asked how he was. She never forgot the exhaustion in Bowie's eyes. The magic dance scene, shot toward the end of August, would become one of Labyrinth's most iconic moments. Bowie, surrounded by hundreds of goblin puppets, was dancing and singing while magically manipulating a baby. It looked mesmerizing on screen, but behind the camera it was total chaos. For that scene, they used 48 puppet masters, over 200 puppets, and massive technical equipment. Bowie's movement area was very limited. He was surrounded by cables, puppets, and people. Ventilation was insufficient, and the studio temperature reached 35 degrees Celsius. Bowie's makeup began running from sweat and had to be reapplied with each take. The scene took a total of 6 days. During the shooting process, Henson kept asking for retakes. Production was losing time. The crew was tired. Bowie's patience was exhausted, but he had to continue. Brian Henson, Jim Henson's son and a young puppeteer at the time, was caught between his father's stress and Bowie's exhaustion. His father saw that film as a personal mission. After Dark Crystal's commercial failure, Labyrinth was his comeback. September 1985, the final scene, where Sarah, the character played by Jennifer Connelly, says to Jareth, "You have no power over me." This was the film's emotional climax, Jareth's defeat, Sarah's victory. But in real life, this scene was the official end of the relationship between Bowie and Henson. Henson shot that scene 14 times. Each time he wanted more fragility, more desperation from Bowie. On the 14th take, when Jennifer Connelly said, "You have no power over me," there was real exhaustion in Bowie's eyes. Henson was finally satisfied. Bowie removed his makeup, changed his costume, and left the sets. After that day, even during post-production, he rarely spoke with Henson. The 6-month shoot had seriously damaged the friendship between the two men. George Lucas was the film's executive producer and closely followed the situation. Jim and David's relationship had reached a point of no return. Both were right in their own way, but they couldn't listen to each other. June 27, 1986. Labyrinth's world premiere was held in New York. Red carpet, celebrities, press, and anticipation. Henson was hopeful. Critics would be amazed by the film's visual genius. But Bowie didn't attend the premiere. The official statement cited tour schedule, but Bowie didn't want to look at that film again. The first reviews were disappointing. The New York Times, visually impressive but emotionally empty. Variety, Henson's weak script creates problems. The box office numbers were even worse. Opening weekend brought in only $3.7 million. Against a $25 million budget, the film earned a total of $12.9 million. Henson was devastated. Labyrinth was supposed to be the peak of his career, but it didn't turn out that way. The press directed harsh criticism at him. Henson made no public statements, but those close to him said he was deeply affected by the situation. Bowie experienced a different kind of disappointment. Labyrinth was the beginning of his difficult years in the 1980s. The Tonight album had been coldly received by critics. Never Let Me Down would be even weaker, and the Labyrinth fiasco was an important factor that accelerated this decline. Bowie's self-confidence was shaken. Between 1987 and 1990, Jim Henson did a few small projects, but none carried his old magic. The Muppet Show continued on television, but Henson's heart wasn't in it anymore. The trauma of Labyrinth had affected him. Friends noticed Henson had changed, more withdrawn, more introverted. In 1989, Henson made an unexpected phone call to David Bowie. They would speak for the first time in 3 years. Henson's voice sounded tired. "David, I thought I needed to call you. We need to talk about Labyrinth. Working with you was a privilege, but we both made mistakes." Bowie was silent for a long time. Then he took a deep breath. "Jim, I should apologize too. Ego blinded me. You were trying to create a masterpiece, and I could only see my own vision." After that phone conversation, they both felt some relief, but the wound was very deep. In May 1990, Jim Henson showed flu symptoms. He delayed going to the doctor because he didn't want to disrupt his work. The situation rapidly worsened. Bacterial pneumonia was diagnosed. On May 16, 1990, Jim Henson died at age 53. The news shocked the world. The father of the Muppet Show, the man who shaped a generation's imagination, had left at too young an age. The funeral was held in New York and thousands attended, and sitting in the front row was David Bowie. May 23, 1990, Cathedral of St. John the Divine, New York. Jim Henson's funeral was one of the most touching ceremonies in film and television history. There were colorful balloons and Muppet characters, but being there was very difficult for Bowie. During the ceremony, Brian Henson gave a speech in memory of his father. He shared that his father had regrets about the Labyrinth process, especially wishing he could have been more understanding in his relationships with people. At that moment, Bowie was deeply moved. He quietly became emotional. After the ceremony ended, he went to Brian Henson. "I let your father down," Bowie said. "Labyrinth was full of both our mistakes." Brian Henson never forgot that moment. David was in such sorrow that day, as if he'd lost a part of himself. Labyrinth brought two men together, but also broke them both. After the funeral, Bowie had a long conversation with the Henson family. He told them about his Labyrinth experience, shared his regrets, and emphasized how important Jim Henson's vision was. "Jim was right about many things. I just wasn't mature enough to see it." In 2003, Bowie spoke about Labyrinth in a rare interview. On VH1's program, memories were revisited for the film's 17th anniversary. "Labyrinth was the most difficult period of my career. Working with Jim Henson was an honor, but we were both very stubborn. He was trying to protect his vision, and I was protecting my artistic freedom. In the end, we both struggled. The film didn't turn out as we expected. Our friendship was damaged." The interviewer asked, "If you could go back and change one thing, what would it be?" Bowie paused. "Ego. If I could go back to those days, I would listen to Jim more. Maybe the outcome wouldn't change, but at least we would have managed the process better." That interview was Bowie's most candid comment about Labyrinth, and the music world was impressed. A rock icon had chosen to admit his mistakes. Interestingly, as the years passed, Labyrinth found new life. VHS sales increased in the late 1990s. The DVD version came out in the 2000s, and a younger generation discovered the film. In the 2010s, social media elevated Labyrinth to cult classic status. Jennifer Connelly's performance, Bowie's costumes, and Henson's puppets gained new appreciation. Today, Labyrinth is considered one of the most beloved fantasy films of the 1980s. IMDb rating 7.3, 78% fresh rating on Rotten Tomatoes. Fan communities hold costume parties. Film festivals organize special screenings, and each new generation rediscovers Bowie's Jareth performance. But Bowie was able to see this rediscovery for a long time. When he died of liver cancer in 2016, Labyrinth still stood as a special project in his filmography. Jennifer Connelly made a statement after Bowie's death. "Working with David was difficult but an unforgettable experience. We struggled on those sets, but ultimately we created something special." Brian Henson said in an interview after Bowie died, "The story of my father and David is sad but also meaningful. Two talented people came together, experienced difficulties, but the work they created still lives on." The story of Labyrinth shows the fine line between art and ego. Jim Henson was a visionary man but couldn't let go of control. David Bowie was a genius but struggled to accept someone else's leadership. Both were right, both were wrong. Labyrinth holds a unique place in film history. It's not just a fantasy film, but also a monument to the challenging collaboration of two artists. In every frame you can see Henson's vision. In every song you can feel Bowie's soul. When you watch Labyrinth today, you can see the exhaustion in Bowie's eyes. Jareth's fragility was real. When Sarah says to him, "You have no power over me," the expression on Bowie's face reflected a genuine emotion. The Henson family holds Labyrinth in a special place. "My father's last great project," they say. Henson was never the same after that film. His creativity was affected, his self-confidence was shaken. When David Bowie died in 2016, he had made a donation to Jim Henson's family. This showed that thoughts about that period continued even years later. The story of Labyrinth teaches us this: ego is more expensive than friendship. Control is less productive than collaboration. Jim Henson and David Bowie were magnificent artists, but on the Labyrinth sets, ego and stubbornness challenged them. When you watch Labyrinth today, you're not just seeing a fantasy film. You're seeing the collision of two talented people, the differences in creative visions. Bowie's Jareth is magnificent, but also tired. Henson's puppets are mesmerizing, but also the product of a tense process. Perhaps Labyrinth's greatest legacy is this: art requires collaboration. When talents come together, if they don't set aside their egos, what they create cannot reach its full potential. Jim Henson and David Bowie taught us that. If this story deeply moved you and you want to discover the unknown moments of music history, please don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications.